What if I told you that the loudest voice ruining your peace isn't someone out there, but the one inside your head? We all know that voice. The one that replays mistakes at 2 a.m. The one that whispers you're not good enough. The one that turns every quiet moment into a courtroom, where you are both the accused and the judge. You try to silence it with distractions. You scroll, you clean, you work, you eat. But no matter how fast you move, the thoughts catch up. They always do. What if overthinking isn't a flaw, but a pattern your mind learned to survive? What if that pattern is now the very thing that's slowly wearing you down? You're not alone. Millions walk around with invisible storms inside them, smiling outside while battling shame, fear, and regret within. The cruelest part? They think it's just who they are, that something is wrong with them. But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if the real issue is that you've never been taught how to relate to your thoughts differently? That no one ever showed you that you are not the voice in your head, you are the one hearing it. In this video, I'll show you 5 Zen practices that help me escape that mental prison, not by fighting my thoughts, but by seeing through them. Before we dive in, let me ask you something gently. When was the last time your mind felt like a safe place to rest? 1. Understanding your inner storm. Have you ever felt like your mind is working against you, like it has a life of its own? You try to sit in silence and suddenly a flood. Regrets from years ago, worries about next week, a stranger's words looping over and over. You didn't ask for any of it, but there it is, spinning like a storm behind your eyes. That's the strange part about suffering. Sometimes it isn't what's happening outside that hurts the most. It's what never seems to stop happening inside. What if your suffering isn't coming from life itself, but from the story your mind keeps telling you about it? Buddhist wisdom has a word for this mental noise, vitakka vikara, restless, repetitive thoughts that jump like a monkey from branch to branch, never resting. The Buddha once said the untrained mind is like a wild beast. It pulls you in all directions. You're not walking through life. You're being dragged by your thoughts. Think about how often you live in imaginary worlds created by your mind. Someone didn't text you back. You write an entire story about why. You recall a mistake from the past, and you punish yourself again, as if reliving it could somehow fix it. But it never does. Your mind is not just thinking, it's storytelling. And the most dangerous stories are the ones we don't even realize we're telling. There are 3 invisible patterns, 3 hidden traps that keep your mind locked in this storm. The first is the comparing mind. You wake up, look in the mirror, and your first thought is a comparison to your younger self, to someone online, to a version of you that no longer exists. Your mind doesn't just see, it measures. It says, I used to look better. I should be further along. Why can they and not me? But comparison is a thief. It steals your peace in the name of progress. It convinces you that your life isn't enough, simply because it doesn't match someone else's highlight reel. The comparing mind doesn't want you to grow. It wants you to feel small and stay that way. The second trap is the narrative-building mind. Your brain is wired to connect the dots, to turn random events into coherent stories. But sometimes a story is a lie. A friend doesn't smile at you. Your mind says, she's angry with me. You stumble in a meeting. Your mind declares, I'm not good at anything. These aren't truths. They're assumptions dressed up as facts. And yet we live by them. You see, the narrative mind doesn't need evidence. It needs control. It builds a world of fear to feel safe. It creates enemies so you can feel like a victim. It invents disasters so you're prepared, except you never really are. You're not just reacting to life. You're reacting to a movie your mind keeps playing, and you're stuck inside it. The third trap is the controlling mind. This one is sneaky. It shows up as overthinking, analysis, and second-guessing. You think, if I just keep thinking about it, I'll feel better. But you don't. You obsess over what you said. You run through every possible future outcome. You try to plan the perfect response, the perfect timing, the perfect escape. But peace never comes from control. It comes from trust. The more you grasp, the more life slips through your fingers. You can't think your way to safety in a world that was never meant to be controlled. So what do we do with all this? Most people try to silence their minds. They distract. Force themselves into fake positivity. But Buddhism teaches something different. It invites you not to silence the mind, but to witness it. You don't fix the storm by fighting the wind. You shelter in stillness and let the weather pass. And here's the truth most people miss. You are not your thoughts. You are not the shame of your childhood. You are not the worst thing you've ever said. You are not the fear that wakes you at night. You are the space in which these things rise and fall. Your thoughts are waves, but you are the ocean. The real suffering begins when we forget this, when we grab every thought and hold it tight like it's our identity. But thoughts are just visitors. You don't need to invite them to stay. You don't need to argue or agree. Just notice them, come, and let them go. And something shifts. In that space, you begin to breathe again. In that space, you remember your softness. In that space, your mind becomes a garden, not a battlefield. So if your thoughts have been cruel lately, if your inner world feels loud, chaotic, and exhausting, I want you to remember this. You don't have to fix every thought. You don't have to win every mental argument. You just have to stop believing the voice that says you're broken. Because you are not broken. You are just tired from carrying thoughts that were never meant to be yours. 2. Awakening your observer mind. What if the voice inside your head isn't really you, but just noise you've mistaken for truth? That inner dialogue, the one constantly narrating, criticizing, fearing, regretting, it feels like you. It sounds like you. It's been there for so long that you stopped questioning it. You assume that if a thought appears in your mind, it must be yours. If you think it, it must be true. But what if it's not? What if you've spent years listening to a voice that isn't wise, isn't kind, and isn't even real? Freedom begins the moment you stop confusing thought with identity. You see, in Buddhist teaching, there's a quiet but life-changing realization. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness noticing them. Thoughts rise like waves, but you are the ocean beneath. Thoughts are clouds, temporary, ever-changing. But you are the sky, vast, unmoved. This is not philosophy, it's medicine. The moment you see the thought as something separate from you, it loses its grip. You don't need to silence the mind. You don't need to win the war. You simply need to wake up from the trance of identification. You are not the storm. You are the sky it passes through. Try this now. Imagine one of the painful thoughts that comes up often. Maybe it's, I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. No one sees me. Now pause, take a breath. Instead of reacting, try saying this silently. I see you. Not in anger, not in fear, just with gentle awareness. There you are again. That moment, that pause, is power. Because in that breath, you stepped out of the thought. You became the observer, the witness. And that changes everything. You don't have to stop the thought. You just have to stop being pulled into its drama. So many of us live our entire lives inside a mental movie we didn't even choose. A film filled with old fears, outdated beliefs, and inherited voices. We are actors stuck in a role that no longer fits, reciting lines we didn't write. But here's the truth. You can step out of the story. That's the gift of awareness. When you see the mind clearly, it softens. It doesn't need to be silenced. It needs to be seen. Awareness doesn't fight the mind. It embraces it, and in doing so, sets it free. In Zen practice, there is a quiet power in simply watching the mind without judgment, noticing the thought, naming it, letting it pass. You don't say, "I am anxious." You say, "Anxiety is arising." You don't say, "I'm failing." You say, "Judging thoughts are here." This subtle shift from identification to observation is the doorway to peace. When you give a thought a name, you take away its power to name you. Start practicing this gently. When a thought appears, meet it like an old friend you no longer owe anything to. "Oh, you're back. The fear of being left behind. I see you. Oh, there's the need to control again. Welcome." Then let it pass, like a leaf floating down a stream. No need to grab it. No need to push it away. The mind only controls you when you fight it or follow it. But when you simply observe, it has no power. Many people fear that if they stop identifying with their thoughts, they'll lose control, that they'll stop caring, stop trying, stop being themselves. But the opposite is true. When you no longer believe every thought, you become more yourself, freer, clearer, kinder. You laugh more easily. You breathe more deeply. You begin to live, not as the voice in your head, but as the presence behind it. You haven't failed at peace. You've just been listening to the wrong voice. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman I once met in a meditation group. She was successful, admired, and always polished, but inside her mind was a battleground. She confessed that every night before bed, she replayed every conversation, picking herself apart for what she should have said or didn't say. One evening, after a guided practice, she sat quietly and whispered something I never forgot. For the first time, I noticed the thought, but I didn't become it. That was the moment everything shifted for her, not because she silenced her mind, but because she stopped worshiping it. She realized, I don't have to agree with every voice that speaks inside me. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to float. And maybe you've been drowning in memories that won't let go, in fears that never knock before they enter. In criticism that sounds like your own voice, but you don't need to fight anymore. You only need to wake up, watch, breathe, because the moment you notice a thought, the moment you name it gently, the moment you sit beside it instead of inside it, you've already started healing. Peace isn't found in a quiet mind, but in a clear relationship with it. In the next part, we'll begin exploring the practices that make this shift real and lasting. You don't have to figure it all out. You just have to take the next step, and the next step is letting go. You haven't failed at peace. You've just been listening to the wrong voice. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman I once met in a meditation group. She was successful, admired, and always polished, but inside her mind was a battleground. She confessed that every night before bed, she replayed every conversation, picking herself apart for what she should have said or didn't say. One evening, after a guided practice, she sat quietly and whispered something I never forgot. For the first time, I noticed the thought, but I didn't become it. That was the moment everything shifted for her, not because she silenced her mind, But because she stopped worshiping it, she realized, I don't have to agree with every voice that speaks inside me. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to float. And maybe you've been drowning in memories that won't let go, in fears that never knock before they enter. In criticism that sounds like your own voice, but you don't need to fight anymore. You only need to wake up, watch, breathe, because the moment you notice a thought, the moment you name it gently, the moment you sit beside it instead of inside it, you've already started healing. Peace isn't found in a quiet mind, but in a clear relationship with it. In the next part, we'll begin exploring the practices that make this shift real and lasting. You don't have to figure it all out. You just have to take the next step, and the next step is letting go. 3 Zen practices to stop negative thinking. You've tried controlling your thoughts. Now try understanding them. Trying to fix your thinking is like trying to calm waves with your hands. The harder you try, the more you stir the water. What if the way out of overthinking isn't through force, but through attention? What if healing your mind begins not when you change your thoughts, but when you learn how to relate to them differently? That's the beauty of Zen. It doesn't ask you to be perfect. It simply invites you to sit beside yourself with presence and gentleness. Let's explore 3 powerful practices that shift your relationship with your thoughts and help you return home to yourself. Zen practice. Number 1, name the thought to tame. The thought, what you don't name controls you. What you name releases you. This technique is deceptively simple but deeply transformative. It's called thought labeling. Instead of reacting emotionally to every thought that arises, you learn to label it gently, clearly. When the mind starts spinning, pause and identify what kind of thought you're having. Ah, that's judging. That's worrying. That's remembering. That's comparing. By doing this, you create space. Suddenly, you're not drowning in the thought. You're watching it from the shore. Labeling doesn't fix the thought. It doesn't argue with it. It simply acknowledges, this is happening. That moment of honest awareness dissolves reactivity. It turns the spotlight of your presence onto the pattern, and patterns can't survive long under light. The mind spins in darkness, but even a single beam of clarity can stop it cold. Zen practice. Number 2, let it pass like a cloud. Not every thought is a command. Most are just weather. Sometimes we panic when a negative thought arises. I shouldn't be thinking this. This must mean something's wrong with me. But in truth, thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. They arise, drift, and disappear unless you chase them. Zen teaches the law of impermanence. Nothing lasts, not even that shame spiral you've replayed for years. What if instead of fighting your thoughts, you just watched? You can even speak softly to yourself. This will pass. This is just a thought. No need to follow it. Let the thought come and go. Don't invite it in for tea. Just wave politely from the porch. You're not supposed to feel peaceful all the time. You're supposed to remember that peace is always underneath, waiting for your return. Zen practice. Number 3, talk to yourself like you would a child you love. If you spoke to your friends the way you speak to yourself, would they stay? Most of us carry an inner critic that never sleeps. It doesn't care how hard you try or how much you've healed. It shows up at the worst times whispering, you're behind. You're not enough. Everyone else has it figured out. But here's something few people realize. That inner voice wasn't born in you. It was learned. And anything learned can be unlearned. Begin by recognizing the tone of that voice. Hear it, then pause. What does that voice need? Where did it first begin? Now imagine someone you love, a child, a dear friend, telling you the same thing. I'm a failure. No one cares. What would you say to them? Say that to yourself. It's okay to feel this way. You're doing your best. Even now, you are still worthy of love. At first, it may feel strange, maybe even fake, but this is how all healing begins, by choosing a new way of speaking inside the old silence. Your mind has been trained to fear. Now it's time to train it to love. These three practices are not about becoming someone new. They're about remembering who you were before the noise began. Name the thought so it doesn't name you. Let it pass because it was never meant to stay. Speak with kindness because you deserve it, especially on the days you feel least worthy. You don't need to master all of this today. You only need to begin. And perhaps this is that beginning, because there's something sacred about the moment you stop running from your own mind. It's the moment you finally sit beside it and listen. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is nothing. Just breathe, just observe, and let the storm pass on its own. 4. 2 advanced Zen techniques to maintain inner peace. The real test of peace isn't whether you can find it, it's whether you can keep it when life gets loud. You've had moments of stillness, fleeting perhaps, a breath that softened your chest, a morning when your mind felt quiet, a conversation that didn't trigger old pain. But then, something happens. An unexpected email, a memory, a glance, a word that cuts just deep enough, and you're back in the storm. Racing thoughts, tight breath, that old voice in your head returns, "See? Nothing's changed." That's when you need your next layer of practice, not just to touch peace, but to stay with it even while the world keeps spinning. Let's explore 2 practices drawn from Zen and insight meditation that help you remain steady, especially when everything else feels shaky. Zen practice. Number 1, mental noting. Watch the mind watching itself. You can't always stop your thoughts, but you can stop being fooled by them. Your mind is incredibly fast. Before you realize it, one small worry turns into a 5-act tragedy. A memory becomes a self-attack. A plan becomes an obsession. Mental noting slows everything down. It trains you to notice what's happening in real time without getting pulled in. Here's how it works. When a thought arises, you give it a soft, one-word note. Planning, judging, remembering, fantasizing, doubting. You don't explain it. You don't fight it. You simply see it. This gentle label acts like a bell ringing in the fog. You realize, oh, this is where my mind is right now. Awareness is not analysis. It's clarity without the commentary. With practice, you begin to see your mind's favorite tricks. Maybe it loves to dwell in the past. Maybe it spins future disasters. Maybe it turns every silence into self-doubt. You'll begin to notice patterns. But more importantly, you'll notice that you don't have to follow them. Imagine walking through a forest. Thoughts are like bird song. They're there, but you don't chase every sound. You simply walk aware. That's the power of mental noting. It teaches you this. You don't need to believe everything you think. Zen practice number 2, the pause and see method. Interrupt the spiral. Sometimes all you need is one breath to stop the mind from pulling you under. There's a moment right before the spiral begins where you still have a choice, a pause, a breath, a small window before your thoughts pick up speed. Most of us miss that moment. But what if you didn't? This practice is called pause and see. It's simple, but it can change your entire day. Step 1, pause the pattern. When you feel your mind starting to spin, say to yourself softly, pause. like pressing a gentle hand on your shoulder. Not forceful, just enough to stop the momentum. Step 2, anchor in the body. Bring your attention to your breath. Feel it enter. Feel it leave. No need to control it, just return. Even one breath, fully felt, can pull you out of the mental tide. Your breath is the doorway back to now. Step 3, ask the heart. What emotion is underneath this thought? What is this spiral trying to protect me from? Is it fear, shame, grief? When you ask, don't analyze, just feel. The mind tries to solve pain, but the heart simply wants to be heard. Most overthinking is a cover for an emotion we don't feel safe enough to feel. Step 4, shift gently. From this place of awareness, ask, what does this moment need? Maybe it's silence, a stretch, a glass of water, a kind word. Not every moment requires a solution. Sometimes it just needs softness. Use this method anytime the spiral begins, before bed, during conflict, while standing in line. It's your portable sanctuary, a thread of stillness you can always return to. You don't have to live in reaction. You don't have to ride every wave of worry or self-doubt. You can pause, you can name, you can choose. That's what these practices offer. Not escape, but empowerment. Not silence, but sovereignty. The goal isn't to have no thoughts, it's to no longer be owned by them. Even in the middle of chaos, there is a still point inside you. These practices are not meant to fix you. They're meant to help you find you again. And you have always been there, waiting beneath the noise. 5. Zen in real life, transforming ordinary moments. True awakening doesn't happen on the meditation cushion. It happens in the middle of your messy, ordinary day. It's easy to feel peaceful when the room is quiet, the candle is lit, and nothing is pulling at you. But that's not where life lives. Life lives in the noise. In the moment your child is crying and you haven't slept. In the moment when the bill arrives and your stomach tightens. In the moment someone's words bruise you and you want to react fast and sharp. That's where the real practice begins. Spiritual strength is not measured by how long you can sit still. It's measured by how kindly you respond when life is anything but still. Zen doesn't ask you to escape your life. It asks you to enter it fully, with eyes wide open and heart soft. That's the gift of everything you've learned so far. These aren't techniques to keep on a shelf. They're companions for your most fragile hours. So let's bring them into the moments that truly matter. The morning spiral. You wake up and before your feet even hit the floor, your mind is racing. I didn't sleep enough. I'm already behind. Today's going to be overwhelming. Your day doesn't begin with your to-do list. It begins with your inner tone. Try this. Pause. Sit up slowly. Place a hand on your chest and whisper, "Here I am. This is a new moment." Then breathe. 3 full breaths. No rush, no fixing, just returning. This tiny ritual rewires the beginning of your day. It reminds your nervous system that you are not in danger, that you can meet the day with awareness, not urgency. The nighttime loop, you're in bed. It's dark, but your mind is anything but quiet. You replay the conversations. You regret what you said. You imagine worst-case scenarios for tomorrow. Sleep isn't blocked by your body. It's blocked by unprocessed thoughts begging for your attention. In that moment, instead of trying to force silence, try presence. Name the thoughts. Planning, regret, worry. Feel your breath moving in your body like waves. Place a warm hand on your belly. Whisper, "It's okay to rest now. The world can wait." Let your body feel safe enough to release its grip on the day. The walk to nowhere. You're walking to the store, or maybe pacing through the house. The body moves, but the mind is lost. You're somewhere else, replaying, anticipating, comparing, escaping. Most of life is missed not in distraction, but in disconnection. Use your walk as a meditation. Feel your feet on the ground. Listen for one sound around you. Notice the wind on your skin, the movement of your breath. This is how Zen becomes embodied, not in exotic retreats, but in the sidewalk beneath your shoes. The conversation trigger, you're speaking with someone. They say something that pokes at an old wound. Your chest tightens. Your jaw clenches. You want to defend, to correct, to shut down. In the space between stimulus and response, there is your freedom. That's the moment to pause. Breathe once. You don't have to answer right away. You don't even have to respond. You can sit in the heat and stay soft. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful, because you are no longer driven by the fire inside, but by the awareness watching it. These are the real tests. Not how calm you are when things are easy, but how present you can be when life presses all your buttons. And every moment you return to presence, even briefly, you rewire your nervous system toward safety, toward peace, toward grace. Enlightenment isn't something you become, it's something you remember. In the middle of doing the dishes, answering emails, and forgiving the people who don't say sorry. The mind wants to fix everything, but the heart only wants to be seen. If you've come this far, it means something inside you is already shifting. You're no longer just surviving your thoughts. You're learning to see them for what they are. Weather, not identity. Noise, not truth. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you felt a small space open inside you. A breath that didn't feel tight. A moment that wasn't tangled in self-judgment. That space is you, the real you. The one who has always been there, beneath the storms, quiet, steady, whole. Peace isn't a place you go to, it's a place you return to, inside yourself. The practices we've shared aren't about changing who you are. They're about remembering what was never lost, your worth, your presence, your power to begin again. No matter how many times you've fallen into the same spiral. So here's a gentle invitation. Before you go, take one quiet moment for yourself. Close your eyes, breathe. Whisper something kind to the part of you that's been hurting. And if this message found you at the right time, if it soothed something heavy, share it. Not just for you, but for the thousands out there still lost in the noise, waiting to hear that they are not alone. You don't need to be perfect to be at peace. You just need to come home to yourself, one breath at a time.